All right, welcome to OA Week. I'm going to start with a little bit of introduction, and then we'll go to the moderator and the presenters. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for OA Week 2023. My name is Kalina Grab, and I am currently a Knauss Fellow in International Policy at NOAA Ocean Acidification Program, and I'm also one of the GOA-ON secretariats. So please note that this session is being recorded. OA Week is presented by GOA-ON, which is the Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network. GOA-ON has three sponsors. First, NOAA, the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Second, the IAEA OAICC, the International Atomic Energy Agency Ocean Acidification International Coordination Center. And third, IOC UNESCO, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. GOA-ON was established in 2012 with just a handful of members. Since then, GOA-ON has grown immensely. It now has over 1,000 members from 114 countries. GOA-ON also consists of 9 regional hubs, which span across continents and oceanographic regions. We'll be hearing from most of these hubs and regions throughout OA Week. If you're not a member yet, you can join GOA-ON today by visiting goon.org. OA Week debuted in 2020 and returned in 2021 when events and conferences were postponed due to COVID-19. Following the successful in-person symposium on the ocean in the high CO2 world in 2022, GOA-ON is bringing back OA Week 2023 to maintain momentum around OA research and provide a virtual platform for the ocean acidification community to exchange their latest findings. We are thrilled to present a wide range of ocean acidification topics and speakers from around the world. During this presentation today, all participants are in listen-only mode. You are welcome to type any questions into the question box, which can be found at the bottom of the control panel, likely on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll be monitoring incoming questions and may take 1 to 2 questions after each speaker. We will address the remaining questions after our final speaker during the question and answer section. For the discussion, you can also use the raise hand function in the toolbox at the bottom of your screen, and we'll call on you to ask questions directly. And so with that, I would like to introduce your moderator for this session, Jessie Turner, who is the Executive Director of the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, or OA Alliance. OA Alliance is a voluntary initiative of national and subnational governments. The OA Alliance works to raise ambition for climate action and transform the global response to climate ocean change. Jessie served as facilitator for the Pacific Coast Collaborative's Ocean Acidification and Hypoxia Working Group between 2014 and 2023. Jessie has 15 years of experience working in public policy development, advocacy, and stakeholder engagement at local to international scales. All right, Jessie, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kalina, and everybody for being here at OA Week and for our session on updates to OA law and policy. And we have a great set of speakers and presentations and ideas to sort of share out with you all today in a way that makes me personally very happy to be part of this larger OA community. So, nope, that is not what I wanted to do. So I apologize. One moment. All right, let's try that again. That slide. All right. So today's agenda, I'll move that around. We're going to cover sort of 3 different themes, if you will. Particularly want to walk through a couple updates when it comes to what we call national OA action plans through the Alliance and increasingly through the international community to support domestic climate, ocean, and marine management goals, and the ocean acidification information and research that's going to be needed to support those. We will be talking and sharing about the USOA action plan, which I'm very excited will be released at COP28, and we'll hear from Kalina about that process. We also have 2 different regional projects designed to integrate OA information across mainstream policies in Europe and the Western Indian Ocean, and really so happy for this community to meet some of the leads that have been working on that from a law and policy perspective. And then finally, we'll have a little bit of the international updates on OA aspects across OARS, of course, the OA Research for Sustainability Program across the UN Decade of Ocean Science, at the UNFCCC, meaning the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UN Sustainable Development Goal Agenda, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. So really a full hour, and really grateful for this opportunity to share out. So just to get started, one thing I wanted to share with you all is that just setting the scene for OA action planning, there is a new report coming out called Ocean Acidification, A Time for Action, the Role of Action Plans in Tackling a Mounting Ocean Crisis. And so this is a report that was created by the Economist, the Economist Impact Group, which started a Back to Blue initiative a couple years ago, focusing on three big themes. One is plastic pollution, one is additional land-based pollution, and then the third pillar of their work is ocean acidification. And so this is part of the Economist Impact Group's offering to bring something forward in the ocean acidification policy space and put together a report about the role of OA action plans, and really particularly calling on national governments to create them under the Alliance framework, or at least pointing to the Alliance framework as a useful tool for governments to organize around. The chapters include things like why is action vital, current status of OA action plans around the world, and then recommendations for building an OA action plan. And so this is a really exciting opportunity. It's definitely the first that I've seen being so intentional and discreet, calling for OA policy. I think we've seen a lot of these types of papers sort of expanding the role of science and the need for growing scientific capacity, but it's really great to see entities like the Economist Impact Group picking up this notion of an OA action plan or the notion of policy approaches domestically. So we're going to have a launch of this paper on the 14th of November in London, and hopefully we'll have some high-level engagement from the United Kingdom Ministry of Food and Agricultural Affairs to attend and announce their commitment to developing an OA action plan in 2024. And then here's just a little example. I think I'm allowed to share it out to this team, but little figures that show up in that plan, like key OA action plan elements, and really helping governments think, we need a vision of success, we need strategies and actions, timeline and funding, ownership, commitment to review. So really making sure that we're thinking about this intentionally over time, and really excited to share the paper once it's ready with this community. And then while we're sort of pushing through the Alliance is the idea that we want to use that paper to really show up to COP28 and jumpstart this commitment to OA action planning, having 10 new national action plans by the UN Ocean Conference, which is occurring in 2025. So it's a really nice way to sort of use that publication and draw more governments into this frame of mind, and thinking about the frameworks that they can pick up domestically to integrate OA activities, and using the action plan to be a framing device for that. So to hear a little bit more about what actually an OA action plan process would look like, and focus in on the US OA action plan that is going to be unveiled at COP28, it is my great pleasure to turn it over now to Dr. Kalina, not doctor yet, but Kalina Grab, International Fellow at NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program, and also moving towards receiving her doctorate of chemical oceanography at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute. So Kalina, over to you. Really excited to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Jessie, for that introduction. And also thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this session. So let's see here. Does everyone see the slides now? So yeah, as Jessie said, as I introduced earlier, I am currently a Canals Fellow in Ocean Acidification Program in a GOA-ON Secretariat. And I did actually finish my PhD in chemical oceanography at MIT Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution last year. And I am fortunate to be a part of the US action plan writing team. The rest of the team members I listed here on this slide, and it has been a large collective effort. And so today I will give you an overview of the process of writing this US OA action plan, and also some of the key highlights as well. So OA is a cross-cutting issue that intersects research, policy, and action across climate and ocean sciences. And the United States federal government has been a global leader in OA science, policy, and capacity building, generating best practices that have been replicated both domestically and internationally. And because of these priorities, the United States has joined the OA Alliance, and this happened at the UN Ocean Conference in June 2022. The OA Alliance, as Jessie talked about, is a voluntary coalition that works to build international momentum for actions that address the causes of ocean acidification, increase research and monitoring efforts, and advance the resilience of coastal communities. The Department of State and NOAA co-lead the U.S. national membership within the OA Alliance, and they have worked with the OA Alliance Secretariat to develop this plan for drafting the U.S. OA Action Plan. And so now the U.S. is currently writing the OA Action Plan to fulfill its commitment as a national governmental member and to further its efforts to address OA both at home and abroad. And the executive writing team for this OA Action Plan is from NOAA, U.S. State Department, and the Office of Science, Technology, and Policy. So the writing team has utilized many different resources to take on this task, including, as pictured here on the left, the OA Alliance has provided an action plan toolkit, which so nicely lays out different themes and sections that are appropriate to focus on within the action plan. And it also emphasizes that there is no one size fits all, since all these different entities that are producing action plans are faced with different issues and have different priorities. So within the US, we are also fortunate to have many state and subnational groups that have also developed action plans. And so these serve as a robust set of examples. So after consulting these resources, the executive writing team has produced a plan for the US OA Action Plan, which was open to public comment in May 2023 on the Federal Register. And as of now, drafts have been reviewed by the Interagency Working Group on Ocean Acidification. So the US OA Action Plan is drafted to be complementary to strategies put forth at the national level, including the Ocean Climate Action Plan, which was published in March 2023. And it also is complementary to existing national and international OA strategies and frameworks, such as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and the UN Sustainable Development Goal agendas. And within the US, there's also a unique combination of local and national efforts that drives the response to OA. Much of it has been mobilized or supported by legislation at the state and federal level that mandates OA action. For example, there's the Forum Act, which directs the Interagency Working Group on OA and federal agencies as well. And the matrix of partnerships between various levels of government and science and communities have also contributed to success in advancing the OA actions. And its leaders at the state, tribal, and municipal, local levels are also pivotal in implementing these different projects and the specific priorities for their communities and locals to address local stakeholder needs. So the US OA Action Plan is designed, as I said, to be complementary to proceeding and ongoing federal actions on OA. And as demonstrated on this slide here, the action plan aims to address the current US federal priorities, future priorities on OA research, knowledge applications, and policy integration. And it will also share best practices and recommendations for other national governments developing OA action plans. And across these areas, this action plan will address 4 themes, which include mitigate OA, increase research and monitoring, resilience and adaptation strategies, and collaborations subnationally and internationally. However, since this plan has not yet officially been released, in this presentation, I will only highlight a few of the actions that have been completed to date, and I will not address the future priorities or the recommendations. So one of the priorities is to mitigate OA through reducing CO2 emissions and taking local actions to remediate OA and developing research on marine carbon dioxide removal. So for example, the US has made national commitments and goals to drastically reduce CO2 emissions while also investing in climate and energy funding for research and technology. The US also produced the Ocean Climate Action Plan to coordinate ongoing and planned ocean-based climate mitigation and adaptation activities by the federal government across short-term and long-term timescales. And while reducing CO2 emissions is paramount, all scenarios considered by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that limit warming below the recommended 1.5 degrees Celsius rely on some degree of carbon removal. And so, considering its importance, the U.S. Ocean Climate Action Plan calls for an acceleration in research and development for MCDR, or marine carbon dioxide removal. And therefore, the U.S. has made important investments to MCDR research, including the $24.3 million funding through the NOP, which OAP is a partner in, as well as the $36 million from the Department of Energy ARPA-E projects. So another priority is to increase monitoring and research to understand the impacts of OA across marine species and ecosystems. While there are many ongoing efforts and programs for OA monitoring, modeling, research, data management, and education activities. For example, the US GOA ship is one of these. That's the Global Ocean Ship-Based Hydrographic Investigations Program, and this contributes to the International GOA ship program. There are also Argo floats, which are deployed internationally, and other autonomous vehicles, such as sail drone, that contribute to research and monitoring. The U.S. has also developed a National OA Observing Network, or NOAA, and this network comprises of buoys, regional research cruises, and ships of opportunity. And there's a database where much of the ocean acidification data is stored, which is the Ocean Carbon Acidification Data Systems, or OCADS. And there's also ongoing research to OA impacts on ecologically and economically important species and habitats. So this action plan also prioritizes building resilience and adaptation strategies for coastal communities at home and abroad that are affected by OA. And in order to ensure that communities are aware of the impacts of OA and are prepared to deal with the changes that it may bring, the US has focused on building resilience. For example, the US has tried to prioritize sharing findings with communities, industries, and other stakeholders, as well as conducting regional vulnerability assessments. The US also has established coastal acidification networks, and there are 6 regional CANs, or coastal acidification networks, currently, and these coordinate interests across stakeholder groups, communities, and tribal nations within the regions that they serve. Another priority is to collaborate subnationally and internationally to better integrate OA knowledge across multiple levels of climate policies and marine management, while also encouraging the expansion of OA Alliance membership and mobilizing the development of OA action plans. The US has invested substantially in regional and international networks to increase these collaborations. So in addition to the US CANs that I mentioned on the previous slide, on a global scale, the US supports GO-ON through the regional hubs, and for example, with GO-ON Secretariat support and capacity building efforts. The US also has invested in a Canada bilateral agreement and a technical training center within the Pacific and capacity building within the Caribbean. So the US OA Action Plan will be a deliverable for the Ocean Decade Project, which is called Understanding and Addressing OA and Changing Ocean Conditions through the Development of OA Action Plans. And this project supports the implementation of the UN Decade Endorsed Program Ocean Acidification Research for Sustainability, or OARS, which is supported by GO-ON. And this action plan will be released in December at a side event in COP28 in United Arab Emirates. So through this side event and the action plan, the United States encourages other countries to join the OA Alliance and support additional legislation, awareness, and capacity building on OA. Subnational and indigenous members are also encouraged to engage with these efforts and produce OA action plans, as many of them have previously. And this is important to better inform how national and regional efforts can support their communities. So I will close with thanking all of those that have been a part of the OA Action Plan writing team, as well as those who have provided support and feedback so far throughout the process. We recognize that while there has been significant steps in the right direction, there's still much work to be done. We hope that the US OA Action Plan seeks to continue building momentum for translating OA understanding into concrete, effective action, both within the US and globally. We are thankful to all nations and subnational actors, as well as intergovernmental organizations like the OA Alliance, for the role that they play in advancing this collective action. So with that, thank you for listening, and I will turn it back to Jessie.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Grab. I'm so sorry that I can always get it wrong and right all the time. But that was a wonderful presentation, Dr. Grab, and thank you so much for all the leadership from NOAA and obviously the GOA-ON and OARS Secretariat's offices in hosting this and being able to present this particular US OA action plan. And I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen again as far as, let's see, to introduce our next speaker and give a little bit more context. So moving, from thinking about this national OA action plan in the United States, it's an incredible and robust example, as Dr. Grab was demonstrating. It has so many different layers around mitigation, research, adaptation, resilience, and international capacity building and collaboration. And it's a wonderful asset to be able to have out into the universe so that other national governments can get a sense of flow and scope and see a little bit of their own priorities within it. So that is a really exciting opportunity. And moving towards our next presentation, one important thing that the Alliance and I think the global community is well aware of is that when you're looking at a place like the United States, there's 12 to 15 years of, a dedicated ocean acidification program that is been stood up through Congress in the United States and is building out the set of information and the set of practitioners and the set of even ideology to say this information is useful to all these goals and targets that we have across our climate, marine management, goals and strategies. And so one thing that we've really tried to do through the Alliance is think about how we work more with our affiliate members and partners and thinking about developing conversations, tools, and communication opportunities to crosswalk that type of capacity building from the policy and management discussion with some of our other government members, some of our other affiliate members in different regions. And so with that, I'm super excited to turn it over to Dr. Reuben Makomere with Faculty of Law at the University of Tasmania. And Reuben is going to talk about a project that we've been working on with WIOMSA, which is the Western Indian Ocean Marine Science Association, that operates out of Tanzania and serves the Western Indian Ocean region. And in 2022 came out with an OA monitoring report, sort of wrapping up some of the last 3 or 4 years of OA monitoring, maybe more, 3 or 4 years of OA monitoring research occurring in 6 different countries across the Western Indian Ocean. And so the Alliance and WIOMSA got together and said, why don't we think about how we make this research report a little bit more contextualized for some of the policymakers and decision makers in the region that, can say, yes, we need more OA science and monitoring in this area, but why? What does it serve? What is it part of a bigger picture, a bigger story to tell? And so it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Makomere to talk a little bit more about where we are in that project. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, Reuben, to share your screen.
All right, thank you so much for that. And thank you for hosting me tonight. Yes, so let me just share my screen right now. I have so many things. Okay. Where are you? I'm just going to find it. Okay. Hold on. Sorry about that.
No worries. And I think we're also saying if you have questions, go ahead and type them in the Q&A and I'll maybe try to take them as we go. If we have time at the end, we'll go ahead and go for that. And Reuben, I can share my screen if that's easier and run through slides.
I think I found it. It wasn't reflecting in the panel, but okay. Done it now. And then, okay, let's see. Is it? Oh, have I switched?
You can see it. Yeah, and if you just do slideshow from the beginning, I think that will give us everything that works.
Technology. Technology is something else. Oh, it's telling me it's paused. Okay, resume share. Okay, right. And then, where is that? Okay, is that better?
We can see sort of the little slide, like we can see, there you go. And then just start from the beginning.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, we can see the big slides. And I think you're at slide 2, as far as I can tell. OA, a complex multi-scale ecological.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, the first slide is just my my introduction, as Jessie has said. So yeah, that's not necessary at this point. But yes, I'm based at the Faculty of Tasmania, and I've been working with WIOMSA and the OA Alliance with Jessie to basically look at how existing policy arrangements within the Western Indian Ocean region can be used to support emerging, and still nascent OA acidification monitoring and research in this part of the world. And as Jessie has articulated there very well, that we have that imbalance where you have the United States, which has this body of work spanning across many years. But then we have these other regions which are just now kind of trying to catch up and trying to really understand what this issue is and how it affects different parts of the world differently. So I'm just going to go and jump right into it. So I want to start by framing this issue from Western Indian Ocean and regional and, of course, African context. And often when we think of OA, we think of it as a marine ecological issue. But in this part of the world, it is also a developmental issue, and that's a really important sort of lens to look at and focus on, because, of course, we're looking at a completely different world in terms of its developmental profile and its where it is compared to, let's say, the United States or Europe or Australia or other parts of the world. So the priority is a little bit different when it comes to how countries interact with the marine ecosystem. And so the important policy implications from that kind of lens or that kind of understanding. Of course, understanding also we're dealing with a region that is going through tremendous change. They're still trying to kind of recover from a post-COVID economy. There's a huge discussion right now that has even gotten into the climate governance space around debt, sovereign debt distress, and how that affects capacity to adapt to climate change and, of course, ocean change and things like that. And then you have this demographic change. The Western Indian Ocean region, for example, over the next, I think it was 2 decades or so, is going to have about 1 billion people. A lot of those people are going to be living in the coastal areas. So that presents a different kind of dynamic, a young demographic that requires some of these sort of developmental needs. So that presents a different kind of lens to understand how OA can impact the relevance of OA and how that can impact the developmental trajectory of this part of the world. And so that makes it necessary to situate this ongoing work on OA science and monitoring within these existing priorities that are trying to manage this changing dynamic in the region. And it's in that context that we are now sort of coming into sort of an understanding of what this project is about and why it's important. And this leads to this idea of having an increasingly strategic imperative. So it's not just about a discrete OA-related action. There's a broader sort of strategic policy imperative to actually understand the institutional landscape and strengthen the linkages between existing OA research and these key management priorities as a way of positioning the countries within this region to better manage, vulnerable marine ecosystems but also manage that interaction between, the sort of socio-economic side with the ecological side of this equation. So that's a very strategic component in there that is at the heart of why this is necessary. And so it is against that backdrop that sort of this project kind of sits in the middle of that context. And it builds on a key report that was done by YOMSA, looking at OA monitoring activity across several countries within the Western Indian Ocean region, or WIO, as we like to call it. And through that sort of foundation, or that pillar, we now seek to provide additional justification and understanding of how we can strengthen this activity within this context, this very sort of particular context, not just in the WIO region, but also across the continent, focusing on three key sort of limbs. So we have climate adaptation, marine environmental management, and development, and to see how we can harness this nexus of these three domains to better situate and support OA monitoring and research in the region. And a sort of corollary to that is to, of course, find avenues to attract more resources that to support this work, because that's one of the key challenges that such an emerging sort of sector, if you like, faces, especially in that part of the world where we have all these competing needs and interests at the same time. And of course, another sort of segment to that is, of course, to build that kind of community of support amongst key stakeholders who can then sort of complement the ongoing work. And so kind of looking at leveraging OA scientific activity within these sort of three major pillars of policy and developmental priorities, really, and having that symbiotic relationship between each of these components in a way that is self-reinforcing when it comes to supporting OA monitoring and research. So why is this useful? Of course, there's a diverse suite of policy and legal arrangements that already are in place that can benefit from increasing OA information across the region. And as mentioned earlier, a lot of these policies exist within those sort of three key policy domains, but they still are yet to really connect into or tap into this potential for potential benefits that can arise out of increased OA information across the region. The second thing that is key to remember is also that these policy priorities and frameworks provide an avenue for better understanding and supporting both OA scientific work and OA as a problem in and of itself, because there's still, it's a nascent problem across the region, and there's still very little information in terms of what it's about, how it affects the region, and things like that. So there's that opportunity to leverage those avenues to better understand and support, both in terms of technical funding work, but also build that capacity to better respond to these emerging challenges. And the third key component is that OA information need not be limited to serving a single policy institution. So, i.e., yes, there's a gap in terms of having a dedicated OA policy, as we have seen in the brilliant presentation done just a while ago in the United States. We don't have that yet, but we have this patchwork of arrangements that can that can be supported, that can support and be supported by this OA information that is being produced. So leveraging those kind of policy arrangements is another way of sort of generating the kind of synergies and support that is required while the process to develop a more dedicated OA policy is ongoing.
And Reuben, just giving a 5-minute warning or even a little bit less so you can speed through our resources even.
Yeah, I'm almost done.
Oh,
so
good.
the deliverables, so we have a few. So one is a publication, and then we have a policy map as well. And we have several communication materials and outreach materials that are going to be used to disseminate to policymakers, and also building a sort of community of practice that is going to carry forward this work. The products, of course, are targeting decision makers, resource managers, a whole bunch of stakeholders really, who are key to basically taking this work forward and or supporting or monitoring and research work in the region. In May, this workshop basically framed and introduced this project to the stakeholders that we identified as key to taking this work forward. And it attracted a lot of different perspectives, and it highlighted really the relevance of this project across different policy sectors and domains. And that was very useful in taking this project forward into the next step of really now mapping out the kind of policy arrangements that are really important in supporting OA scientific work in the region. And so one of the things that was brought out really is that there are quite a lot of intersections between OA and existing policy goals and targets, existing policy arrangements. And also there's quite a lot of monitoring activity in the region already that is sort of just requires that additional support to really begin to have that kind of impact that is being envisioned in terms of supporting policy frameworks and eventually responses. So in terms of timeline, we're still developing the products that we've mentioned, and we have key target opportunities to basically present this work out and try to highlight some of the key points that we've already learned. COP28 is one of them, and then a key one is February next year, where we have a regional Nairobi Convention meeting, where this is now the regional body that's basically in charge of governing the marine environment in that part of the world. So it's a key opportunity to really push this to policymakers. And so again, it highlights the key points that we need to mainstream OA within existing monitoring arrangements. Of course, this needs to be a deliberate and purposive effort, specifically targeting OA monitoring and research. And there needs to be a sort of more coordinated positioning and leveraging of existing policy arrangements to maximize the existing synergies that are available. And so to conclude, the key important point here is, of course, that this is both a developmental and ecological issue. And so there's that strategic imperative to really present these opportunities to policymakers and other stakeholders in a way that fits in within the existing pressing policy needs and priorities in the region. And that's where we see the opportunity to situate this project, really. Yes, and that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Reuben. And it's been a pleasure working with you and with WIOMSA on this project. And as you can all hear from the audience, it's not as straightforward as just saying we need, X national government to create national OA action plan. go for it. And really trying to build a little bit more of a community of thought across non-science practitioners about why this is important. And so really excited to be releasing those towards the end of the year. And as Reuben mentioned, it'll be a continuing conversation with practitioners in the region, many through GOA-ON, the GOA-ON hubs, as well as WIOMSA as we go. So really grateful for that presentation and excited to share that out. Again, go ahead and feel free to add comments, questions in the chat, and we'll just move on with our last regional presentation before going to the international sections. I'm really excited to turn it over, and I will do so quickly, to Inken, Dressler, and Annika Frosch at the Nordic University and European University Institute, respectively. Inken and Annika are going to share a little bit of a presentation or a little bit of a project that we've been working on, particularly looking at European policy directives and conventions that can be used to take up OA information and further reflect and advance OA information across European governments and waters. So it's a little bit of a similar vibe. As you can see, we're trying something new with the Alliance here to say, yes, we want action plans, but we also need to create the conditions for action plans to be created. And I think this is a really interesting project. And I'm really thrilled to turn it over to these two to share more about it. So I will be quiet and turn it over to you. I think, Annika, you are sharing screen. Inken, I know you've had some computer troubles, so you will be doing your best to follow along and let us know if you're panicking, and we can, don't worry.
All right. I'm actually sharing the screen right now. Let me just do my last touches here. Okay. Well, thank you, Jessie, for the introduction. With our presentation, my colleague Annika Frosch and I would like to provide an overview and introduction into the EU legal and policy framework that can be utilized to incorporate OA information. The quick overview of our presentation. So we want to introduce our project and why we are adopting an EU focus for this project. Then we will share some insights from our side event at the European Maritime Day in France, which was our first opportunity to share some preliminary findings with a broader audience. Then we will provide an overview of the EU legal and regulatory frameworks that we presented during the European Maritime Day, namely, and then before diving deeper into one particular legal instrument, namely the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, which has become our current focus for our project. And then finally, we would like to provide you with a quick overview of what is to come in the near and not so near future. All right, so the project. The incentive for the project actually came from a paper, which is called Assessing Frameworks for Implementing OA Action, European Policies and Legislation Targeting Ocean Acidification in European Waters, which was written by Galdis et al. In 2020. We then got further momentum for our project through the OSPA Quality Status Report, which has a specific chapter on ocean acidification. We decided to focus on the EU because the EU has a unique and shared policy and legal structure and shares it amongst its members. Moreover, within the EU, there exists a great accumulation of extensive OA-related research, for example, through the GOA-ON networks, which otherwise can only be found in the US. Following from especially this extensive OA research, we then had the question of how this OA research is actually translated into legal and regulatory frameworks. So that's why we focused on directives, which are specific EU instruments, and also some regional seas conventions. We then, as already mentioned before, shared our preliminary findings at the European Maritime Day.
Yeah, so European Maritime Day was held this year in May 2023 in France, in Brest, and it lent itself as a good event to introduce our first findings to some policymakers within the EU, as the European Maritime Day is really a place where maritime community meets of the EU to network and discuss and create a joint action. And so we decided to create a side event to the European Maritime Day called Exploring Marine Management and Policy Response to Ocean Acidification, as you can see here on the slide. And this was a co-hosted event together with the OSPAR Commission, as well as GOA-ON Northeast Atlantic Hub and the OA Met Hub. And as I said, this is a place where really ocean leaders meet. So it was a good event to come together with policy and decision makers across Europe. We discussed a variety of things at this event, but most importantly is the last bullet point here. We discussed relevant EU and national ocean and marine policy frameworks to address and minimize ocean and coastal acidification. So what we did was basically to present some materials that we had done some research on to the policymakers, to also to some extent get their feedback on and to see how far these materials are helpful. So first we, as Inken already mentioned before, we looked into some conventions and bodies that have relevant responsibilities within the EU when it comes to ocean acidification. So here on this slide, you can see we had, for example, the OSPAR Convention and OSPAR Commission, the Helsinki Convention and HELCOM, Barcelona and Bucharest Convention, and the Arctic Council. So what we were trying to do during our research that we then presented at European Maritime Day is we really wanted to look into these bodies and these conventions to see what are they already doing that is relevant to ocean acidification, and how can we integrate, if they haven't done anything with regard to ocean acidification yet, ocean acidification strategies and knowledge into that and what they're already doing. So we particularly looked into monitoring, reporting, reduction of CO2, reducing other ocean stressors such as land-based pollution, and build ecosystem resilience. So we created this document with different tables such as this one. Obviously, this is just to show you like the grid, like how we envision it, and we filled this table really in with information that governments could take away and that we could build our further research on. The same we also did with conventions, and Inken will show you now how we did that.
All right, so for the EU itself, we looked at different directives, namely the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, the Marine Spatial Planning Directive, the Water Framework Directive, the Nitrates Directive, the Habitats Directive, and the Birds Directive. And then, similar to what Annika already discussed just now, we developed tables which highlight if and how the specific instruments can incorporate OA information through mechanisms such as monitoring, reporting, OA research, mitigation and remediation, adaptation and resilience building. And as you can see on this table, just highlighted in blue is where we can find or include such information in the instruments. All right, so from this rather high-level overview that we presented at the European Maritime Day, we then decided to focus our current efforts on the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. As discussions at the side event and with the EU Commissions later on showed this instrument to be one of the most impactful legal instruments to address and incorporate OA information. Additionally, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive is also currently in the process of being revised, which gives us an additional opening to give OA-related recommendations. So what exactly is the Marine Strategy Framework Directive? It is actually a European Union legislation which aims to protect the marine environment, especially the marine ecosystem and biodiversity. It tries to achieve this goal through the legal concept of good environmental status, which the EU's marine, which has to be achieved within the EU waters. To fulfill this goal of good environmental status, the marine waters of the EU must be dynamic, ecologically diverse, clean, healthy, productive, and the marine environment must be able to sustain sustainable use and activities by humans. So besides this general goal of achieving good environmental status, there is also the idea that member states have to take certain steps to achieve this goal. So first of all, the member states had to come up with initial assessments to determine the characteristics which are important for good environmental status, and each of the sub-regions that have been defined within the Marine Strategy Framework Directive. So here it is important to understand that the EU marine waters as a whole have been further subdivided into subregions to facilitate the overall regulation. Also, the member states had to come up with continuous monitoring, assessing, and reporting of the environmental status of the waters, which they then had to provide to the EU institutions, or still have to do so. And they also have to establish environmental targets and indicators to achieve good environmental status, which is also facilitated through so-called programs of measures that again help to achieve and maintain good environmental status. As a side note here again, there will be the overall revision, which is pending until 2030.
Just giving a 3-minute warning or so, but don't panic. Just know. Go ahead, Annika.
Yeah, so one of the core elements of the Marine Strategy Framework directives are the descriptors. There are 11 of them, and these descriptors are qualitative descriptors which are supposed to determine when there's a good environmental status within, for instance, a particular region of the EU. And as I said, there are 11 of them, and we don't really want to touch these descriptors during the revision because that might lead to, maybe negative influences as well. So we don't want to touch them, but instead we wanted to look in the descriptors that are already there and see where does ocean acidification fit into these descriptors. Similarly, as we have done so already with the directives and with the different conventions. And this should be helpful for the states also to understand what they can do in their future work when they're trying to implement the MSFD. And as I said, there are 11 of them. Not all of them are relevant for ocean acidification. The ones that are most relevant are descriptors 5, 7, 1, 4, and 6. And 5 is a descriptor that deals with eutrophication. So naturally, ocean acidification would fit in quite nicely there. Descriptor 7 is the one that deals with hydrographical conditions. And then the descriptors 1, 4, and 6, and I'm sorry that I have the feeling that the PowerPoint is not catching up with me. Those last descriptors 1, 4, and 6, they deal with ecosystems and the health of ecosystems. So all of these descriptors would be interesting to look at when we're thinking of ocean acidification and where really states can implement their research and what they learn about ocean acidification within these descriptors. As I said, ocean acidification or pH is not really mentioned in any of the descriptors. The only time we can find at least pH is in Annex 3, Table 1, which mentions pH, but it's only saying that this should be considered when states are doing, for example, initial assessments or when they're looking into good environmental status, but there's no real obligation to consider pH or anything with regard to ocean acidification. So based on this research that we have presented to you now, the directives, the conventions, as well as particularly MSFD, the Marine Strategy Framework directives, our future plans are to really continue working with additional regional seas bodies and partners such as HELCOM, Barcelona Convention, and the OA Mediterranean Hub, the slides back I can see, and really present our findings, communicate our findings to them, and see what is useful, what we should work on further, and also just generally receive them feedback from them. And in addition, we want to make specific recommendations next year in 2024 for EU member states, as the MSFD is foreseeing some deadlines where member states have to hand in some reports. For example, for 2026, there's a monitoring program that they have to report on. And in 2027, the measures. And as we said earlier, by 2030, the MSFD revision should have been finalized. To give some input for that, for the revision, we can next year also during the public consultation hand in some of our research and information that will then be considered for the revision. And that's it for us. Thank you for having us today, and I'm interested to see who's coming next.
Well done, friends, especially with the internet anxieties or shutting down right before. So nice job, and really grateful for everyone following along with us. It's, as you can see, we're taking this approach to try to get a little bit deeper and a little bit more specific to some of the policies and legal frameworks that can be utilizing this OA information that's being generated across different hubs of GOA-ON potentially, or in this case, regional seas conventions. So really grateful for that work. I've dropped in the chat some of the links to those elements. and including the Western Indian Ocean project as well as the European project. I think we're probably done with time. So my suggestion, you can tell me, Kalina and others, Alejandra Navarra is with me today from Ocean Foundation. We were going to give a little bit of an overview of the international scene. Alejandra, did you have slides? And if not, can I suggest an update?
Yes, I do have some slides.
Okay, well, let's do this. Let me turn it over to you. And if you can speed through slides in 4 minutes, or even just give the highest level overview of the international perspective, but really focusing on OARS outcome 7, which is the OARS outcome for policy development, and really pointing to some of the resources that Ocean Foundation has been queuing up and some of the perspectives that you guys have on that internationally. So I'll turn it over to you for the final set of minutes.
Okay. Sure. Don't worry, for some strange reason, I cannot open my presentation. I'm not in my computer, but I know we have some minutes only, so I'm going to talk about what we have been doing.
Sure, and I will go ahead and share. Let me do this, Alejandra. We have 4 minutes. I think that maybe 5 minutes are going to take over. Let's do this. Trust in me. Trust me. I'm going to cue you up and then turn it over to you to pontificate.
Okay.
Great. Okay. So I think let's go ahead from slide. So just as a quick bypass, flyover of the international space, we know that we're trying to really reflect and elevate ocean acidification across areas like the UN Decade of Ocean Science, the Convention on Biological Diversity, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UN Sustainable Development Goal 2030 targets. And just quick, big updates, biggest picture. At the UNFCCC, we now have something called the Ocean and Climate Dialogue, which has been going on for several years and increasingly trying to make sure parties understand how OA information is relevant and needs to be accelerated across the UNFCCC. Under SDG 14.3, we all probably know that well, to minimize and address ocean acidification. Yes, we have a methodology for monitoring and reporting, but we need to see more voluntary commitments to OA policy and investments. And that's why groups like the Alliance, groups like Ocean Foundation, OARS are really calling on these, 10 new national action plans by 2025 at UN Ocean Conference to help move that work along. And then finally, I'll turn it over to Alejandra to speak a bit more about the UN Decade of Ocean Science. Outcome 2, identifying data and evidence needs for OA mitigation and adaptation at different scales. That's a little bit of some of the regional work that you were hearing about. And then outcome 7, enabling countries to reduce OA through policy and legislation. So Alejandra, I'll just turn it over to you from here to add anything that you want to share from the Ocean Foundation's perspective through OARS or otherwise.
Okay, so we have been working on the OARS Group 7 outcomes. We did a white paper. And what we have found on working on policy and legislation is that policy vehicles require we have been working with countries on policies that require adaptation, such as adoption of early warning system, hatchery intake, valve controls, alkaline materials to buffer water, the ones that require mitigation, such as actions that restore and protect blue carbon habitats, that address runoff and other land-based pollutants, and the otherwise enhance natural infrastructure to increase ecological and economic resilience for the communities. Funding has to be provided in the long run, continuously for monitoring of observations of ocean chemistry changes. So I think it's very important to work together on this with the countries. What we have been seeing is that it's not very easy to try to enforce an ocean acidification package, but more thing that has to do with climate change laws and legislation. We have been working more in the Latin American region. We have been working with Mexico, and we have been working now very recently with Peru. We started just on the handbook that we have. There's the handbook for the Commonwealth, and we have the toolkit for policymakers. We are still in an interface of how to still work on this ocean data hub, knowledge data, information that is very, very needed. And Most of the countries don't have that. So we have to go like to the basics and see how monitoring capacities they have and where are they putting the data. So they have all these early warning systems, and we are still working on that. Thank you, Jessie.
Thank you so much for sharing, and apologies for getting truncated there at the end, but it's really great to have Ocean Foundation here at the table. And obviously, as the slide says, Ocean Foundation and the Commonwealth Blue Charter are co-champions of Outcome 7, which a lot of this work is underneath. And then OA Alliance and the Norwegian Institute for Water Research are co-champions of Outcome 2, identifying data and evidence needs for OA mitigation and adaptation at different scales. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and just say a big thank you to all the presenters today who have been working on these bigger projects at different regional scales, and hopefully provided some insights, and feel encouraged to put questions in the chat. It sounds like we'll be able to have written response to those if that's useful. And Kalina, over to you to wrap us.
Yes, thank you, Jessie, so much for leading this session. And also thank you to all the speakers for such great information shared today. We also want to thank you, the audience, for joining us for OA Week 2023. And please do not forget to consult the website and register for any sessions that may interest you. If you would like to stay up to date with the GO-ON community, consider signing up as a GO-ON member if you have not already done so. And you can also discover more about ocean acidification research for sustainability, or OARS, as Alejandro was touching on here, if you scan the QR code on the screen. So with that, thank you so much for joining this session, and we hope to see you in more sessions throughout the week. Thank you.